Welcome to the Hard Skills Show with me, Dr. Mira Brancu. On this show, we discuss how to develop the nuanced hard skills needed to drive significant systemic change to make a real impact through your leadership. Be ready, take notes, I always do, reflect deeply, and identify at least one small step to further develop your hard skills muscle. Today's guest is Dr. Liz Sweigart, and we'll be talking with her about the power of adaptive planning and creativity in strategic decision making. So that's a great topic for our season 3's focus on mapping a leadership strategy. And I'm super excited to have you here, Liz.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a little bit about Liz. She started out as a history major who dabbled in medieval studies and chemical engineering. And then she moved into nonprofit finance as a leader, to Big Four tax partner, to emerging tech startup executive. So nothing about her 20 plus year career has been linear. And as an independent board director and advisor, Liz now works with individuals and organizations ranging from startup founders to the C-suites and boards of publicly traded multinationals in various industry sectors. At her core, Liz is passionate about fostering environments where human beings can thrive and flourish. She holds a bachelor's from Rice University, an MBA from the University of St. Thomas in Houston, and a PhD in organizational leadership from the Chicago School. So welcome, Liz. Fascinating history.
Well, thank you. And, when I think about it and I look back on it with perspective, I can see all the dots connected. But man, at the time, that was not readily apparent.
Tell us about the dots. I'm sure a lot of people would like to know.
Well, I've always been somebody who has been led by curiosity. So I think curiosity is probably the most powerful word that there is. I am relentlessly curious. I want to know why. And I want to see what I can do. I want to know what is possible. And so my interest in the art of the possible is really what has guided my whole life and frankly my career. I grew up in New York City, and now here I am coming to you from Houston, Texas. So pretty different. I moved to Houston to go to Rice because I wanted to see what else there was in the world. I from there thought, well, I'm going to go into the family business, which is law. And right before I graduated from college, I said, ooh, I don't want to do that. And so I found my way into the Big Four. Well, I guess at the Big Six at the time. And from there, I just followed my curiosity. And that's what led me to nonprofit. It's what led me to getting my MBA and being back in the Big Four and public accounting, to the land of investment banking, to back in the Big Four again, and then now in tech, and specifically working in blockchain, digital assets, Web3, the decentralized web. So I would say that along the way, I had wonderful people, and I know we share some mentors in common. I had wonderful people who encouraged and supported me and who created opportunities for me to meet other people who were forging their own paths. And being able to see other people doing it, that was empowering for me. Being able to develop my own leadership of self, being able to develop my own self-awareness, my situational awareness, my ability to self-regulate, allowing me to lead myself through my career. And then that positioned me to be able to lead others. And now in the roles that I have, I get to both lead founders of businesses, people who are in very well-established businesses. I also get to lead teams of my own. So it's been an incredible journey, and I feel so incredibly fortunate to have had just this chance to follow my relentless curiosity.
Yeah, I can so relate. And I do think there's something about that curiosity that helps you lead in kind of a unique way, right? A lot of leaders find themselves in their leadership role through their technical expertise. And sometimes it's hard to let go of their technical expertise, their first love, in order to have a bigger view in their sort of organization. I think you and I probably had a sort of similar um, pathway. And that I remember when I was in grad school and my advisor was like, Mira, you need a focus. And I was like, but being a generalist is a strength, I think. And he's like scratching his head. He's like, what, is she crazy? Being a generalist is not a strength. But I did realize that my curiosity led me to explore the things that were not just interesting to me, but allow me to flex and be interested in what other people were doing instead of having my own individual agenda, which is one of the sort of key components of leadership, is making sure that you're thinking broadly and you're supporting multiple kind of lanes of effort within an organization or outside of the organization or things like that. I don't know if that sort of resonates for you too.
Absolutely, it does. And I think you hit on, I mean, you hit on several things there. There's a lot to unpack. Um, but in particular, um, where where I see the biggest opportunities in leadership are for leaders to be really interested in and curious about their people, the people that they are leading. As a leader, when you show an interest in others, that is when people become more interested in you. I tell people frequently that if you want to be anything in a room, be the most interested, not the most interesting. People love to talk about themselves. I mean, that's why I'm here. We love talking about ourselves and giving people an opportunity to share about them, to share who they are, what motivates them, what they're passionate about. Wow, what do you learn from that? And especially as a leader, you learn about how to motivate people. You learn exactly how you will demotivate people. It's a really incredible gift to be curious about others and the world and about yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it's beneficial to your growth to be curious, right? It's beneficial to other people's growth around you. And I think there's something infectious about it. I mean, um, if you're the kind of leader that is really interested in succeeding, the organization succeeding, but also how it might succeed uniquely with the set of people that you have supporting it, um, that can be fairly expansive if you're willing to sort of
Mhm.
go there, right?
Yes, absolutely. And when I think now about how distributed the workforces are that I interact with. So when I think about being in the bleeding edge of technology, if you will, so many of the people I work with are from all sorts of corners of the globe, several of which I've never visited. And I'm quite a frequent traveler. Um, but what I am learning is that when when we really open ourselves up and we create those spaces for people to share about themselves, to teach us, and as leaders for us to learn, active learning and being able to onboard new information, use that information to inform what it is that we do next. It is so intoxicating, you could say, to have such a distinct point of view and plan for action that you are just going to plow forward and do what it is that you've decided to do. And one of the biggest challenges of leadership is being humble enough to say, I have gained new information. Based on this information, what I firmly believed before does not seem to be accurate for where things are right now. And I want to change my trajectory. And a lot of folks that I run into perceive changing their mind as weakness.
Mm.
Whereas I think changing your mind and being willing to be seen changing your mind in public is one of the greatest acts of courage you can have as a leader, because it also frees up your people to say, you know, the thing I was doing doesn't seem to be working. I probably need to try something different, and to be open to that level of experimentation. And particularly, again, in the space that I'm in with technology, it is changing so quickly. And what we think is going to be the outcome of what we build oftentimes isn't. And so we have to pivot. We have to be flexible and open to change. And especially in the area that I'm in, which is open source, that means that you not just your code, but your design. I mean, everything that you are doing is on public display as you're doing it. You are building in public. And that takes a degree of bravery and courage that, I mean, it's astonishing to be willing to put yourself out there and say, here's the best I know how. I am learning how to do better, and I am open to feedback. And that to me is leadership in a nutshell.
Yeah.
We are leading in public. We are being seen trying in public. And that is hard. And taking feedback, putting that feedback into practice and action, and being willing to be wrong, being willing to learn, being willing to try, to iterate. That's what we're called to do. Not to pick one single position or set of beliefs and hold fast to them forever, even in the face of conflicting information.
I'm going to follow up on a number of these awesome ideas, but a lot of this, what you're talking about, is clearly connecting to your thoughts around adaptive planning. So I'm wondering if you could define for folks, how do you see adaptive planning? What is that? How would you define it for people?
So there's two pieces that, and fairly obviously there's adaptation and then there's planning. Most of us have been raised up either personally, professionally, or both with what, and I will come back to tech frequently because when you're a hammer, as Maslow said, everything looks like a nail. Uh, One of the things that we've been raised up in is something called waterfall, which is where we spend a bunch of time planning and we think through things, and we can end up in the great analysis paralysis. But we gather all of this information and we study and scrutinize all of this information, and then we come up with a plan. And we frequently document the plan. It has multiple steps, and you can put it in charts. And sometimes you even use a software to organize your plan. And then you hand out tasks and responsibilities. And then you get to the end, and maybe what it is you've done isn't actually what's needed anymore. But man, did you follow that plan? That is most typically how organizations and individuals have operated for a really long time. There came to be this philosophy, primarily applied to software development, called Agile. And the idea is that instead of doing everything in this big, long waterfall process, you actually break it up into small pieces. You do it in something called sprints. Typically, they last about 2 weeks. And the idea is that you are going to accomplish a certain set of tasks. You're going to have a particular set of outcomes at the end. And then you're going to share those. And as you're going through it, you are frequently asked to pivot because you will build, you will test, and it will break. And you will be getting feedback constantly from the people who are ultimately going to use the thing that you're building. And so when I think about what does it mean to be an adaptive planner, what is adaptive planning? It is taking these ideas and these concepts from disciplines such as Agile and applying them to our strategic decision making. So it's a question of how do we remain agile, adaptive, nimble, and a bit humble, while we are also mapping out next steps, tasks, responsibilities, how we're going to hold ourselves and others accountable. Because you can't just wing it. And at the same time, if you have something that is too rigid, you're not able to respond to what is happening in real time.
Great. Great definition. That's super clear. We're nearing an ad break. Once we come back, I want to get into some of the challenges to balancing those two seemingly opposite tensions. And then, when does it not work? What are sort of the impediments to that? So you're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Dr. Liz Sweigart. We air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to join our online audience, you can ask questions there usually we're there on LinkedIn or sometimes YouTube at talkradio.nyc, and we'll be right back with our guest in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Dr. Liz Sweigart. We were just talking about adaptive planning. We were talking about what it takes for leaders to truly lead in today's environment, which is to find this sort of fine line, maybe tension, maybe balance between knowing you need a plan to a certain extent, but you also really need to be nimble and adaptive, flexible to adjust as you learn. Behind these is still a learning element, and there's a humility element too. And so it got me thinking about a lot of things. One is, you mentioned a lot of leaders feel like changing my mind is a weakness. Tell me more about that sort of internal barrier. How do leaders get beyond, or how do we all as a society get beyond this assumption when there's so much good outcome that can come from that kind of mind-changing, pivoting, adjusting kind of stuff?
Ooh, talk about a lot to unpack. Well, so Mira, I really appreciate that question. And I've got a few examples. Let me start off with one. Oftentimes I work with founders of companies who are looking to raise money, because your number one job as a founder is not to run out of money. Your number two job is to not run out of money. And so much of the role and the time for a startup founder is focused around how do I ensure funding, whether that funding is from an external investor or it is from revenue that we generate. Some form of business activity that's bringing in cash to sustain the business so you can continue to grow. And one of the things that I often find, especially in the technology space, where there is a lot of competition for venture capital funding, is that a founder will decide, I am going out for a particular type of fundraise, and I am going to target X amount of money. And it's usually a pretty big number. And they will get feedback from the market. And the feedback from the market says, if you adjust your approach a little bit, you won't get as much as the number you originally said you were going to get. But what you will get is something that will sustain you and help you get to a position where you can actually go and raise the larger sum from a position of strength. And it is challenging when you have gone out and you feel like, I've put myself out there. I've told people I'm going to go and raise this big amount of money. And now I'm changing what I'm doing. What's the market going to think? What are people going to say? How are they going to judge me? And pivoting your message and being able to say, I assessed the feedback from the market, and it told me that our best course of action is to take this amount of funding and use it to shore up this portion of our business, to expand our marketing in this area, to reach this new market, to actually get this part of our product delivered to the market. That's a very powerful message, and it reflects very well in the leader, because it's showing that you learn, that you adapt, that you're able to take feedback, that you have a degree of humility. And at the same time, it can feel very uncomfortable because you think, I've put myself out there like this, and what I said was going to happen, what I thought was going to happen, didn't. And the thing in life that gets us more than anything is mismanaged expectations.
Mm-hmm.
When either we think something's going to happen and it doesn't, or we tell somebody else that something's going to happen and it doesn't, or someone else promises something to us and it doesn't happen. Being able to manage the expectations is a critical skill for leaders. And so when we're being adaptive, one of the things we have to do is we have to be open to the difficult feedback. We have to be open to the fact that there's a lot of things that are force majeure, details that we have no control over. We can control the energy that we show up with. Everything else, not so much. So how we do that as leaders is extremely important to the outcomes that we can achieve.
Yeah. And most of the time we fear the negative judgment about our decision as leaders. Most people are not judging you about your decision. They're judging you about your approach. And that's, I think, what you're getting at. Like, if you can't communicate the why and explain, like, here's how I got here, here's why I'm changing my mind, here's how I sort of like thought through that, that helps people say, wow, she was really thoughtful. Like, she really took in a lot of different data points to make that decision, right? If you just sort of like willy-nilly say, we were doing that, now we're doing this, stop judging me for it. Most people will judge you for that.
Yes, they will. We all learned a very valuable lesson in elementary school. Show your work. Like, there's a reason. Bless all of the math teachers I have ever had. Show your work. Because if you come up with the wrong answer, but I can't see how you got there, I don't know where things went off the rails. It may be that you actually understood all of the concepts, but it was the arithmetic that tripped you up. Or what I'll see is, no, you didn't understand the concept. And so that's what we have to fix. There's a difference between not knowing how to do something and making a careless error along the way. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier when I brought up what open source means and building in public. You are showing your work. And as leaders, how we show our work is important. We are not coming out and saying, oh, I'm flying by the seat of my pants and providing every thought that comes into our head the moment it comes into our head. That's why we've developed self-regulation. That's why leadership of self is so important to being a successful leader, because we're able to process the information and then share what is helpful. We can provide information that helps, as you just well articulated, people to follow our train of thought. And you're right, they may disagree with our train of thought, and they will know how we arrived at what we arrived at. And when I see leaders being successful, achieving the objectives that they set out, realizing the outcomes that they wanted, it's that they were able to do that. They were able to articulate in fairly real time what they were doing and why at an appropriate level of detail for the stakeholders that they were communicating to. And it comes back to managing expectations, because that's how you do it. You help people to know what is coming, how will it affect me, is there anything I can do about it, and what am I responsible for? One of the most powerful questions I keep coming back to in coaching conversations, not just formal coaching relationships, but coaching conversations. What am I responsible for? And helping the other person to ask that question of themselves. Because so often we take on so much more than what we are actually responsible for. And beyond that, we take on things over which we have no control. We can do nothing to affect the outcome. And then we beat ourselves up and we invite others to beat us up when the expected outcome doesn't come to fruition. We had no control over it. And yet we wanted to kind of pretend that we did.
Yeah. So true. For so many situations is half the battle is figuring out, where to put my best effort. What is my responsibility versus not, right? And so if a leader is to engage in this effectively, this trying to find the balance between planning and flexibility, thoughtfulness, innovation, failing fast, but being really careful, with the risks, that kind of thing. It sounds like one of the pieces around how they would do this is managing expectations, right? So I'd love to get into your frameworks for strategic decision making, starting with the managing expectations after we come back from the ad break, and dive into like some examples of how to apply this. How can leaders explore this? Okay. So you are listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Branco, and our guest, Dr. Liz Sweigart, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Liz Sweigart, who is sharing with us about adaptive planning and how we can use it to find that right balance between being thoughtful about your planning, mitigating risks, while also iterating and trying things out and being a little vulnerable about it. So for leaders who like find this entire concept uncomfortable, what are some good ways? Tell us about your frameworks for strategic decision making, being able to balance these, starting with these expectation management, and anything else that would be helpful for them to think about.
Absolutely. So let's first think about it on two parallel paths. I like to think about things in terms of leadership of self and leadership of others. So on the leadership of self side, there are periodic check-ins that you need to do with yourself, separate and apart from what you're doing with your team. Whether that is your immediate leadership team, it's an extended leadership team, it's an entire organization. You know the groups that you're working with and how frequently you're meeting with them. But first and foremost is starting with yourself. And as an adaptive planner, what I try to do is first define the timeline. So we've all heard of SMART goals, and the T in SMART goal is time bound. So first, it helps when you're iterating and experimenting to remember that not everything is forever. So frequently, I talk to leaders who are concerned that if they make a decision, it is irrevocable, and that is how things are always going to be. And frankly, that's indicative of a fixed mindset, which is the opposite of a growth mindset, which is fueled by curiosity, as we talked about before. So first and foremost, it's let's be reasonable, because we are not Karnak. And so we are not prognosticating into the far-flung future. We have a period of time that we are working on. Now, some things take years. They take a long time to do. And they can still be broken up into pieces. On the longest of journeys, there are still way stations and there are still milestones. And so the first thing to do is to identify, well, what's the right milestone for me to be working toward? And I talked earlier a bit about sprint planning and how things are done in 2-week periods. Well, it doesn't mean that everything's said and done in 2 weeks. Your stories translate into something called epics. So you may have an epic journey that you're on, and you can still break it down into smaller parts. And so the first question is really, where am I? And what is the appropriate next way station? What's the next place that I need to stop and check in, or that I need to deliver something, that I need to have something to show? And making things time bound is also helpful because it stops things from feeling like they're going to drag on forever. It forces you also to be more iterative and to evaluate more in real time. I know what I'm trying to work toward. Is what I'm doing getting me farther down the line toward that objective? So first is breaking things into pieces. Typically, I work on 1 week, 2 week, 1 month, 3 month. That's typically the sizes that I want to take. Those are bite-sized chunks to me. Next, we want to think about what are the outcomes that we seek. Frequently, we'll talk about goals and objectives. Those don't tend to be terribly specific. What I want to know is, in a week, I will have fill in the blank. So for example, in a week, I will have onboarded a new employee. I have somebody we've just hired, and within the week, I'm going to make sure that all of their information, their forms, and everything else is filled out and we're all set. Okay, now I know what my outcome will be. My outcome is that I will have an onboarded employee. Okay, I know that it's a week. Now I can start breaking it down into tasks and component parts. And if things start to go in the wrong direction, I have a way to be adaptive as we go and change what's happening. So whether it's something as mundane as a task like that, or it's something that's much bigger, For example, finding new board members, raising money, developing or designing a new product, whatever it is, you can identify the outcomes that you want. So for example, if you're thinking through products, services, in 6 months, we will have an app in the App Store, for example. Okay, I've got a time. I know what the outcome is going to be. Now I can start to break that down into its component tasks and parts, and I can start asking the other important questions, who do I need to bring along with me? Who am I not considering? Who or what resources do I need to bring to bear? Who have I not met yet that I need to help me with this? Starting to ask the questions about, well, what else am I not thinking of? Who else could I consult? What other resources are necessary here? What type of feedback should I be seeking? Whose feedback is most important in this process? Being able to think through those questions, that's the adaptive part of it, because it's information and input that's not coming from you. 99% of the adaptation you have to do will not be caused by you. The 1% is you caught a cold. And now you've been out sick. And so you need to make some changes. But almost all of the adaptation and the agility that you will be called on to demonstrate is as the result of something that is an external force to you.
If you pay attention to the force.
If you pay attention, yes. That's an important one. Where is my attention? What is drawing my attention? Where's my attention being pulled now? Data points. That's the other part of adaptive planning. There is data all around us. And we have a tendency to over-index on single data points. Mm-hmm. One person tells us they hate the thing. Someone else tells us they love the thing. We glom on to a single data point, and that informs all of our decision making. Collect as much data as we can, analyze it, and then decide what we want to do. One of the most valuable lessons I learned getting my PhD was that I didn't actually have to take everybody's feedback. Well, let me rephrase that. I did have to take it. I needed to listen to it. I didn't have to act on it. My work is my work, and I own my work. And sometimes I get feedback that's really helpful and informs how I do my work better. And other times, it's just feedback. It's just data. And I choose not to do anything with it. So being able to take a balanced view toward the data that we receive, the feedback, and decide what we want to implement and what we don't, and not doing it in a vacuum. Seeking outside opinions and advice. That's why founders have advisors. It's why we all have people that we trust, why we have mentors. Seeking those opinions, and again, it's more data. It still doesn't mean you have to act on it. Even if it's the best mentor you've ever had, or it's your most strategic advisor, it's your choice ultimately what you do with that data.
Yeah, and I do think that you're right. People do over-index on one data point, and you could literally apply this to almost every decision-making opportunity you have in your life, right? So you mentioned mentorship, right? If you lean on one mentor for every single decision you make in your life, you are missing important information, because one person cannot be everything to you, right? We grow up with multiple mentors in our lives as when we're children. Our, one parental unit might bring, you one thing that you need. A different type of parental unit might bring something else, a grandparent or a friend or a peer or a teacher. There are lots of people who bring different things to us. And that, if you start recognizing that already and you apply that to just how you think about serving in a leadership role, serving your organization, right? It's the same thing. It is recognizing that in order for you to make really thoughtful decisions, you need a lot of external data points and gathering. And so for people who think about this constant pivoting, adapting as an overwhelming or anxiety producing process or a feeling of deep uncertainty, it's probably because you're trying to do it all by yourself with insufficient information. And that's what I'm hearing from you, Liz, is you're saying, don't do it by yourself. Don't just guess out of thin air. Don't just make a 10-year plan and just hope that it'll work out. Actually be very thoughtful about gathering consistent, ongoing input from lots of sources, and it will help you continue to hone and hone and hone. It actually makes you a better, like it's almost like you're your own adaptive system, right?
You are a complex adaptive system
Right.
at that. Yes, well, that's a wonderfully succinct summary. And the piece that I would add to it is that in addition to seeking the feedback and gathering the data, one of the most important things when you are doing this planning up front is rigorous honesty about the potential obstacles. We are really, really good at identifying the outcomes that we want and being able to describe how they will look and how they will feel. Think of it as the 2 sizes too small swimsuit hung on the refrigerator. I will fit into this. I can see myself at the beach being the envy of all. And my plan is to cut out all sugars, all carbohydrates, everything that makes life enjoyable between now and then. And I will hang this swimsuit on the refrigerator as my constant reminder. And that lasts about a day and a half. Because you never really addressed the obstacles between here and there. And part of what goes into this adaptive planning for leaders is being rigorously honest about the obstacles and building into the plan how you will address them. Now, you don't necessarily have to assume that all of them will show up. And it's very possible that there will be uncertainty around the obstacles. But generally speaking, going into things, you have a pretty good sense as to what might be on the horizon. So being honest with yourself and others about the potential obstacles and then building your plan to address them. That is critical for you as an adaptive planner, and then being open to the fact that things will be different.
Yeah. Let's talk about, we're nearing an ad break. Let's talk about, after the ad break, what are the sort of typical obstacles that you see in leaders who are really trying to lean into this and are still finding some challenges? So when we come back, let's dive into how to sort of work around what those challenges are and how to work around them. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Liz Sweigart, and we'll be right back. Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Liz Sweigart. Dr. Sweigart, all of what you said sounds great, and it's perfect for the hard skills because these are really hard. They are really hard skills, right? You've already mentioned part of the obstacle here is getting out of our own head about being right, showing up with no weakness, which means trying to appear like I'm not changing my mind. We've worked through some of that. Some of the other obstacles that I'm thinking about is people who just have a natural state of anxiety about will things work out, and try to sort of work through that. People who, feel like their organization, if they're not at the top of their organization, feel like their organization might not look well upon them if they just engage in trial and error and they make mistakes, right? We talk about that related to psychological safety all the time, when it comes to organizational development work, right? But for a leader who does have the opportunity to engage more in this work, share with us some examples of the most common challenges that you've seen personally around, trying to engage in some of these kind of strategic adaptive planning ideas that you had. And what are a few ways that people can work through that?
So what's interesting to me is that really there are three obstacles, the three big ones, and they transcend organizational size. They transcend just about everything. It comes down to time. It comes down to resources, personnel, budget, bandwidth, which is just another function of time. And it comes down to self. It comes down to the things that we do that get in our own way. So let's start with the first one, which is time. I'm pretty sure that I say it all the time. I hear it from other people all the time. I don't have time. No, you do. We all, funnily enough, we all have 24 hours in a day. All of us share that. What we're really saying is this is not a priority. Getting really clear on your priorities. And if something is not a priority, but you feel it should be a priority, and yet you're saying, I don't have time, what you're really saying is it is still not a priority. Get really clear about your priorities and get really clear about the priorities of the people who control the resources you need. It's not just about understanding your own priorities. It's about understanding the priorities of the people 360 degrees around you, because it's the people whose inputs you need and the people whose support you need and the people who you're going to need to help you do stuff. Understanding that and finding the ways that you can communicate. Again, this is an expectation management. Finding how you can communicate how what you're doing and what you're asking for aligns with those priorities. And if it doesn't, be honest about that. So that's number one. Number two, resources, money, and people. It doesn't matter if you're working in tech. Tech is human. Human beings build technology for human beings to use. So every business is a people business. If you don't have enough people to do what it is that you purportedly need to do, it's also a prioritization problem. And so the question becomes, am I really using my resources efficiently? Am I using them effectively? And is how I have people deployed, how I have money deployed, how I'm making investments, is that aligned with my priorities? And if getting something done is a priority, you will align the people and the money to do it. And if it isn't, again, be honest about that. The last one's ourselves. We are really, really good at getting in our own way. And one of the biggest ways we get in our own way, and I know that I can geek out with a fellow psychologist on this, is a little something called felt understanding, which is a beautifully meta concept that essentially says what I think other people think about me. So much of our behavior is guided by what we think other people think about us or what they will think about us based on how we act. And spoiler alert, most people are too busy thinking about themselves. But we're convinced because we're busy thinking about ourselves that they're thinking about us. Generally speaking, they're not. And so we change and adapt our behavior based on what we think other people think without actually asking. Going back to what we were talking about before, clarifying others' expectations of us, clarifying our own expectations for ourselves, and communicating those things proactively and consistently. Ongoing communication. As you, the title of the show could not be better. That is a very, very hard skill. So when we see obstacles that folks face, those are really the big three. And they ultimately come down to a question of prioritization and expectation management. And you can manage expectations once you've set the priorities and once you understand what other people's priorities are. And managing expectations comes down to communication. And so as leaders, what can we do? We can manage our own energy. We can communicate early and often, transparently and honestly. And that's, I mean, it shouldn't be the secret sauce, but it is. And I think going back to this idea we've been talking about adaptive planning, what we're doing is we're sketching out the outcomes we want to see, and we are developing a map to get there that's based on connecting dots. We identify what the next milestone is, a plan to get to that milestone, and then we figure out what we need to do to get to that milestone that might not have been on our original roadmap. And so we are being adaptive while at the same time sticking to this overall sketch that we've made, because what we're working toward is an outcome. We know what it is that we want to see at the end of this time period. And now it's a question of adapting how we are setting priorities, how we're communicating with others, how we're deploying resources so that we can get there. And so what adapts is that planning and utilization of resources, not the outcome. And there are times that we will decide midstream that the outcome isn't exactly where we need to go. And that's a point where we can pivot and we can articulate a different outcome. And then we can reprioritize and reorient and repoint our resources to that particular outcome. But this is about this is about transiting between way stations on our way to a particular outcome.
Excellent overview, Liz. Thank you. It reminds me, it resonates for me just personally in that my own company, I made a 10-year plan, right? And the 10-year plan had to do with a very big overarching interest area of supporting women in leadership. How I got there and what I did has iterated over time as I learned more and more and gained more clarity. And that's really what you're getting at, is it's okay to adjust over time as you gain clarity about the needs of your market, and you're gathering data and you're learning and you're iterating. And I haven't let go of the outcome. It's just I haven't sort of trapped myself into a very specific plan. So with all of that, we could go on and on forever. If people want to learn more about you and your work, where would they go?
The best place, honestly, is LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. I welcome hearing from folks. I just don't believe you can know enough generous, empathetic, excellent, and kind people.
Awesome. And she is one of them, folks. So reach out to her and connect with her and follow her. She shares so many thoughtful nuggets well beyond, just this one topic area. So audience, what did you take away? More importantly, what is one small change you can implement this week based on what you learned from Liz? Share it with us on LinkedIn at Mira Brancu or at Liz Sweigart and at talkradio.nyc so we can cheer you on. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch all over the place. In addition to being a live show, we're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So please go subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, share with others to increase our visibility, reach, and impact. The stuff we talk about on this show is part of our research-based strategic leadership pathway model that we teach in our Tower Scope Leadership Academy, as well as in group coaching and other work that we do. To find out more about that, go to gotowerscope.com and you'll find out more about the Leadership Academy and other work that we do. Thank you to talkradio.nyc for hosting. I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, the host of the Hard Skills Show. Thank you today, Dr. Liz Sweigart, for being with us. Really appreciate your knowledge and have a great rest of your day wherever you're tuning in from. Bye, everybody.